Today, we have Emma Groenbaek on the show. She's at Donor Child on Instagram, and you may not know who she is, but she is a woman who is happy about being donor conceived. She really loves her story. She loves how her parents talked to her about her story. She loves how her parents shared the information about her story and her genetics. She talks about donor siblings. She talks about conflicts that she's had in sharing her story, and the beautiful story about how proud she really is about being donor conceived. She talks about so many things. She's inspiring and informative, and I think you'll really love the show. So pull up a chair and start listening. Welcome to Donor Conception Conversations. This is the one podcast created exclusively for people who are planning to use donor conception to build their family. My name is Lisa Schumann. I'm your host. I'm an author, a researcher, I'm a therapist, and I'm the host of this podcast. And I'm here to share the tools and the truths that you need to have a better path to parenthood. And today on the podcast, I'm very lucky to have, I'm sure I'll mess up her name, Emma Groenbaek. She's a lovely young Danish woman who is donor conceived and is quite a celebrity on the internet talking about her story. And I think that everybody out here who's listening will be very interested to know the evolution of her story and how she came to share her story. She's got quite a beautiful history, and so I will let her start to tell you a little bit about it. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So thank you so much for coming today. I'm so grateful to have you on. Could you share a little bit just to get started with what your story was like, how you discovered you were donor conceived, and what your feelings were about it?
Mm-hmm. I was born in 1996. I have both a mom and a dad, and they spent quite a lot of time trying to conceive. They went through almost every possible treatment. We're trying for, in total, 7 years before they were able to conceive. Had actually almost moved on to adoption when they had one last embryo on freeze, and they thought, well, we might as well give it a shot, but they had totally given up hope on that. And luckily that was just what they needed, and they became pregnant. As for someone born in the 90s, the general advice for parents was not to disclose about donor conception. Luckily, my parents chose a very different path. They decided that they'd been so transparent to friends and family all the way through. For them to change the story now didn't feel natural. I just think that was what was mostly in line with their values and how they view themselves, I guess. So they decided to be completely transparent with me. They did that by creating a children's book that we read as a nighttime story from I was around 3 years old. So I've grown up knowing that I was donor conceived. So I don't really have a specific time where I know that I understood or know that I was told that I was donor conceived. It's been a very gradual process of me learning and understanding throughout my childhood.
Wow. So when would you say was the earliest time that you remember talking about that? Because I know you share on social media that they made a book for you, which was really incredibly insightful for them. As you know, I mentioned to you, I have a life book that I use for that purpose, and lots of people are doing that now. But back then, there was really not a lot of information, or people weren't doing that. How do you think that you started to look at that and make sense of it? And how do you think that they started to think about, maybe this is a good vehicle for my daughter to understand her origins?
I think my mom understands things very well. When she needs to explain something, she would always draw and explain. So I think for her, it was a very natural way. She made drawings of sperm and egg and used them to explain the process to me. So I don't really recall when or how much, but I just have memories of us reading the book together as a nighttime story. And also I have my mom saved a drawing I made when I was 5, which is like an egg cell surrounded by sperm cells. So we know that at least from I was 5 years old, I understood quite a lot about like reproduction and how a baby is made in like a more scientific way than you would expect from a child. So that was a very big part of their story. And also, well, the storyline was that they really wanted a child, but it just didn't seem to come naturally for them. And they went to a doctor to get help, and a nice man gave sperm to put on my mom's egg because that was the issue they had. And so for me, that has also always been the story about the donor. Like, he wasn't a big part of the story, but he was mentioned as kind man, helped my family. But the story was actually about us as a family. And I think that was really a great way. And I think that a book like that is a really great resource for parents to like share a very difficult story, because it can be connected to a lot of trauma. I think it's a good way also for parents to rehearse sharing the story over and over again. And then the child can ask questions and more advanced questions throughout life as they understand more and more.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you remember when you were little any feelings you had about it, or was just kind of your family story? What were your feelings or thoughts about it?
No, I definitely had feelings, and we talked a lot about it at home. Thing is, I have 2 younger sisters. They are almost 2 years younger than me, not quite, and they're twins, and they are my dad's biological children. And this was because of the new IVF method called ICSI at that time. It was new. So that became a possibility just after I was conceived. And so when they had me, because it had taken them so long to have me in the first place, they went on with fertility treatment for a second child immediately after. And then they tried this, at that time, new method, and then the twins came. So we talked a lot at home about like the difference in their story and my story. And my parents always said that I was such a wanted child. And I really honestly felt like the most wanted child, because they had gone through so much, spent so many years wanting to start their family. So for the first many years, I felt really, really proud to be donor conceived, because it meant that my parents really had to work hard to conceive. So I felt a bit more special than regular children, which is a bit funny now. But yeah, that was the story I got from my family. So that was 100% how I felt.
Emma, that is so beautiful. Wow, that is incredible. How beautiful that you were feeling like you were so wanted and they were trying so hard to have you, and this is how they created you, and you really felt that love and that devotion from them. That's really a beautiful story. Did you think about ever, well, my siblings are not donor conceived and I am, and so that puts us in a different sort of category in the relationship, or we have different stories, or we're different in some ways? Do you see that at all, or no?
We talked about it, like, for how my relationship with my parents were, and genetics in that, like how I was genetically connected to them. But we never really talked a lot about it with my sisters. I think we just felt like we were siblings. And I think we were quite old when we realized that me being donor conceived also had something, like it also meant something for our relationship and how we were genetically connected. But it hasn't had any impact on our relationship. It hasn't really meant anything. Well, me being donor conceived and them being twins, I also share it in I wrote a book about like my life as donor conceived and how it was growing up as well. And a part of this is I also share that I sometimes, when I was a teenager, could feel left out, especially when we were on vacation, because then it would be you're very intensely together. And then it would be like my parents, who are a couple, and then the twins, who have something that you can't really compete with. And so I would feel a bit left out. And whenever you're in a spot where you're not comfortable, you grab onto things that can sort of explain why you are different in that situation. That was the only time I would find myself spiraling into negative thoughts about being donor conceived and me not being as big a part of the family as everyone else. But I knew in my heart that this wasn't the case. And we were very good at talking about it with my parents as well and with my sisters. So I feel like this is the only time where we've had something difficult and had it. But I wouldn't say that it was something that affected our relationship. It was more like something that reminded me that I was donor conceived at a difficult time, maybe.
Yeah.
Don't know if that made sense
Yes,
at all.
it makes perfect sense. And it's hard to know if your siblings were not twins, or if there was, let's say, a fourth child that you could connect to, if that would all be very different, right? Because just like, you see people very often will talk about their donor conception, and maybe they get angry about their donor conception when they're really angry about something else when they're little kids. Not that, to everyone out there, that you can't be upset about donor conception. You need to have whatever feelings you have, but sometimes it gets played out in different ways, and it's hard to know, I suppose, if there was a fourth child or if they weren't twins, if that would all be different for you, because it sounds like in other aspects of your life, it hasn't been a problem for you.
No, it hasn't at all. And I think what I really want to bring forward with this, sharing this story, is also, I think that this is something that goes for everyone. Like when you find yourself in a spot where you're challenged in some way, you search for things that could make sense. And then donor conception was an easy topic to make this feeling have some sort of sense. I don't know if you understand where I'm going. We all have that. And I think it's important to know that this can happen when you're donor conceived, because it's an easy, that you're different in some ways. So it's an easy way it's an easy thing to grab onto, I guess.
Were there other times in your life where that came up? Like, for example, as you were developing, I know a lot of people kind of start to wonder, is my body type similar to my parents, or my hair color, or my nose shape? Are those things similar to my donor or similar to me? And as I develop into a woman, is that similar to my donor or similar to me?
So I think for me, I look a lot like my mom. I do look a lot like the rest of the family. Like when you see a family photo, you wouldn't be able to see that I'm any different. But yeah, I think we've always really celebrated the things that made me different. Like again, instead of seeing it as a disadvantage, I think my parents always said that, for example, my mouth is very different from my mother's. So she would say that might be from the donor, but we've always felt that it was a positive thing. It wasn't a disadvantage. It was just a thing that reminded me that I was donor conceived, something that might be from him, but we have no clue. But it was something that we would joke about. I think it's very important how you talk about these things, if you make it into something that's a problem or if you celebrate it. I think that makes a very, very big difference for the child.
Yes.
For me, it's always been something that we've celebrated and talked about in a positive way. So that's also how I've grown up feeling about it. And my family, they've been very open about me being curious. We've talked about what features that might come from him, and that was okay to talk about. I think that's also very important, that you feel like you can be honest and you can explore who you are and what you look like, and talk about that with your close family without them feeling threatened, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I guess kind of just to your point, that we really celebrate children for being their unique selves, right? No matter what they look like,
Yes.
and you're saying, you look like your family. I know in my family, I have blonde hair and green eyes. The little sister had blue eyes and red hair and a curvy body, and my middle sister was really tall and dark hair and hazel eyes. And so we
Mhm.
all look so different, and we had the same genetics, right? So we don't even know, right?
Yeah.
Do these pieces come from a grandmother or from, wherever? So ultimately, celebrating that person as a unique individual is such a beautiful thing to do. And I think you're right. This idea of really celebrating people for who they are rather than just kind of picking apart, well, this is like a problem because this comes from the donor, or whatever people are feeling may point to their own
Mhm.
insecurities about their infertility, or I'm not sure what, but I think that what you're saying is so valuable because your parents did such a beautiful job in celebrating you, Emma, who you are. So
Mhm.
that's beautiful. That's a really nice story. And I saw that your dad came onto one of your
Mhm.
Instagram posts,
Yes.
which is really so sweet. And it seems like the two of you have a really nice relationship.
Yeah, we definitely do. No, my dad and I are very close, and I feel like the journey we've been on has also made us even closer. In the book, I also share he did like a speech for me when I was a teenager for like a big party we held, celebrating, like you celebrate when you go from, it's like a Danish tradition where you go from like being a child to becoming an adult. And he did a speech, and this was the first time where he talked about being my dad and me being donor conceived
Oh,
in like a more public setting, I guess. It was in front of friends and family. And he said, thank you for giving him the opportunity to become a father and to be my dad, and for me to like be 100% in that relationship. And what I also say to people when they ask me about my relationship to my dad is that I feel like we're even maybe a bit closer because we're not only family because we share the same genetics, we're family because we chose each other. Like we chose
mm-hmm.
to be each other's family. And I feel like that is very, very strong.
Mm.
And now we've grown with that as well. And when I obviously told my parents when I wanted to start sharing my donor conception experience more publicly, I asked my parents if they were okay because I knew that that would reflect on them. I think my dad is a lot more private than my mom, so he was a bit hesitant in the beginning, but I think he saw the value because they really would have loved to have that resource when they were going through all of this. So for me to be able to give other people that reassurance that they really need it, I think they both really saw the value in. So they agreed to, and now he's just been a very big part. As you said, he's also joined me in Instagram Live, sharing his experience and thoughts and feelings throughout the process. Yeah, I think that's really, really strong. Had a very big impact on our relationship as well, as we've been more open about this topic, I guess.
It's fantastic. And for all of you out there, if you don't follow Emma, you have to follow her and see these posts that we're talking about. They are so beautiful. It's really so beautiful to see their relationship and their connection. That's great. And he seems very comfortable. It's not, an issue for him. You're his daughter. There's no concern about, the donor and all of that. The next question is, and I'm sure a lot of people want to know about this, what are your thoughts about searching? You haven't searched for your donor yet. Do you plan to, or what are your thoughts about that?
As you know, I've always known that I was donor conceived, and at no point have I ever felt a need to know more about him or go look for information or even donor siblings. Like up to this point, I just haven't felt the need. I don't see what I would gain, but I see the potential of a lot of disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
So for now, I'm not, I don't feel the need, but we talk a lot about it with my family. And I know that I have their support if I someday change my mind, because we talk about that being a possibility as well. Like, you never know if major things change in your life. Like, if when I someday have kids of my own, or if something happened to a family member, that feeling might change. And I know that I have their support if I ever want to. But as for now, I feel like I have the family that I want and need, and I don't see what I would gain from going down that path.
So, Emma,
Mhm.
when you say there's a potential for disappointment, what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts about that. I think that there's a big chance of getting disappointed because you can build up a lot of expectations
Mm-hmm.
or thoughts about him being this kind man or amazing person who wanted to help, or him
Mm-hmm.
being someone that you would really like, and you just never know.
Right.
And I think that this disappointment is I don't know how to manage that in the best way. And that's also
Mm-hmm.
why I'm often asked about if I'm happy that my donor is anonymous, and if I would recommend that, or open donors, or what's the best choice. And for me, I think that managing expectations, telling
Mm-hmm.
the truth, like disclosing to the child from early age, and then managing expectations is very, very, very important, because I think for me, I felt like that was a door that was closed. I was okay with it, but I'm very scared for the donor conceived people with open donors, where the parents have talked a lot about the possibility of them getting to know the donor and meeting the donor, and they wait 18 years, and then maybe the donor has changed his mind, because this is still so new. So we
Yes.
don't have any research. So I'm very much looking forward to see if this is actually going to be a problem or not. But I'm very scared of the potential that these people get extremely disappointed, and that this is going to affect them negatively, as it has with donor conceived people who are not told from early age. So discovering late in life, I feel like these big things where the expectations are not met
Mm-hmm.
can have a very big impact on our life, and not always a very positive one. So I think that this is a very important thing to talk more about, actually, the expectations. And there are a lot of different expectations, and maybe the child and the parents' expectations are not aligning as well. So
Yes.
you never know. And I feel like the one thing I can say is that there's no easy choice in this. Like, every choice is connected to a lot of difficult decisions and things that you say yes and no to. And yeah, I just think it's important to have that in mind throughout the journey.
I completely agree with you, Emma. And I think it also highlights something else that you said before. So, as I mentioned, I have adopted children, and one of my children have a good relationship with their birth parents. Another one doesn't have the same relationship. For every person, it's different. Looking back at
Mhm.
your genetics, thinking about, do I want to have that relationship or not? And I think that what happens sometimes parents, of course, are nervous about the connection with the donor, but sometimes they're the other extreme. They're overzealous. They want the child so badly to have a relationship with the donor because they think it's so fantastic. And as you said previously, which I think is so important for everybody to think about, to hit home, is we're really here as parents to celebrate our child's individuality and who they are as an individual. And for multiple children in a family, they may feel all different things, right? And exploring their fantasies about it, exploring their fears, exploring their hopes and dreams, and really helping them manage their expectations, as you're saying, is so much part of really appreciating that person as an individual, and as a parent, not putting our desire or our belief system on our children, but instead let them be who they are and let them follow the path that's right for them.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, that makes
Yeah, and I
perfect
think this
sense.
is something that we still have to learn. Like, donor conception in the field of reproductive medicine is still quite new, in the sense that when there's change, we see it, like, it takes so many years. So
Hmm.
I feel like we've gone from not disclosing and not saying anything to like the opposite. You need to know everything.
Yes.
The more you know about the donor, the better, in contact and know all donor siblings. And we don't really know what's good and what's the best for the children yet. My hope is that we'll find somewhere like a bit more natural moving forward, and that people are a bit more mindful to this.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point. And this whole idea of also the donor siblings, we just had someone on the podcast who wrote a book about that and the research she's done. And some people feel like it's great if you can introduce the siblings from day one and they get to go to the playground together and be friends. But we even see in those situations, some people say, I really wish I could have made that decision myself and that my parents didn't make it for me. Some people say, I'm really glad my parents made that decision. And other people feel like they really like the donor siblings when they're children, but they grow up and become teenagers and maybe they have different tastes and they're not really interested in them anymore. So I think, again, it is, it is an evolution and people change over time, right? Even if we do have to get better at helping donors understand that there will be people who will probably reach out to them. But even then, their lives change. They might get married and have kids of their own. They may go on, travel the world or move away and be more or less interested, right? And that's going to impact the donor-conceived individual.
Exactly. That's a very tricky part about donor conception, both for the parents and for the donors and for everyone involved. We're making decisions on behalf of something so many years out in the future. Like you're making a decision. Do you want to be an open or an anonymous donor? You're making that decision, but you have no idea how your life will look like in 18 plus years. And the same goes for the parents. They're making decisions on behalf of a child they haven't even met yet. So it is just very tricky. And I think that there's no way to take that part away other than trying to learn from different decisions and life experiences and hopefully statistics at some point.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And as you mentioned, I think also people are so different. Have you had experiences from other donor-conceived individuals who have different views than you? And do you feel that it's been hard to kind of try to kind of explain that your perspective is, as you mentioned, just as legitimate as somebody else's perspective that might be totally different? Do you think that it's still hard for people to hear that?
Oh, yes. I think it's very, very, when you've had something that was a big trauma in your life, it's very difficult to hear someone like me sharing a very positive experience. Also because many of these donor-conceived people who are hurt by the fact that they were donor-conceived, they want to change a lot of things. And I think that they feel like me sharing my story takes a bit of their power away. And for me, I think it's very important that we hear both sides of the story, because I think it's very important to learn from their experience so that we don't go down the same path again and again. But also people need to hear positive stories because otherwise they get frightened. Like I have so many people sending me messages saying that they are so happy they found me because everything they read online was so negative. So they almost didn't know if they wanted to go on with donor conception, because they felt like, how can we succeed with this? Because donor conceived people are very hurt by life. And that's not at all the case for all of us. But the people who were hurt are very vocal and they're very strong in the community, whereas people who feel like I do have a very happy and in many ways very ordinary life. Like that's how other donor conceived people like who have stories like myself, we feel like we're very normal people and we don't think a lot about being donor conceived. It doesn't play a very big part of our life, like everyday life. So they don't think to share their stories because, well, there's no sensation there, I guess.
Yeah. It's very hard for people, as you said, to only hear one perspective, and everyone deserves to share their story in the way that it happened to them. And I think it is really helpful for people who are pursuing this to hear your story and to hear
Yes.
how you feel your parents really helped you feel comfortable with your story.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I know a lot of people who feel exactly like I do, also with people who had solo mothers or lesbian parents. So I'm not at all the only case, but we just aren't a lot of people sharing. Also, I think that's also has something to do with how the donor conception community has turned out, because as for now, there is not really a great place for us to connect. We don't really have the sense of community. And I think that the tone being very, at sometimes very rough, scares a lot of donor conceived people like myself, the ones who just have happy stories, doesn't really feel like they have a lot to say about their donor conception. I think it scares them from sharing their perspective as well, because they don't want the arguing online,
Right.
I guess.
And that is tough because it can get pretty ugly out there when people start to argue. And as I said before we started, I really think it's wonderful that you're sharing your story, Emma. And my heart goes out to you, because I know it has not been easy for you to do that. And you've had a lot of resistance and a lot of people saying all kinds of things. And I really feel that it's so important that you keep going, because you present such valuable information to people as well, and really give hope to people who want to conceive using a donor and feel afraid of doing that, because there are so many fears, right? There's so many unknowns, and then they just get fueled by a lot of voices. And of course, there are negative stories, but there are also positive ones, and we need to leave room for everyone's story. So I really applaud what you're doing. I think you're doing an amazing job.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And tell me, how did you decide to do this? I mean, to be so brave and to say, okay, I'm going to get out there and get on Instagram and tell my story and share this information. What made you decide to do that? Because for all of you who don't know this, and I just discovered this today, Emma is also a medical professional. She's a nurse. And so she has a very professional hat that she wears, and she can come to this process with. So obviously you know lots about this from all sides of it, and can share so much value with everyone. So that's true for several people, but it can be scary to get out there, and it's time consuming, and it's not part of your job. So what made you decide to do this?
While I was studying, I had a friend, and she is lesbian, and she had a girlfriend, and they were talking about the possibilities of creating a family. And I've always been very upfront with people that I know that that they're going to be a part of my life for longer periods of time. I always tell that I'm donor conceived. I'm very transparent with that, because I feel like it explains a lot about the person that I am and about our family and dynamics. And yeah, just says a lot, I guess. I have no clue why I do it, but I do.
Mm-hmm.
So she knew that I was donor conceived, and she came to me and asked me for advice. And I told her about my story and how my parents went about things. And I thought to myself after that, well, maybe other people can benefit from our life experience. And so I went online to see what I could find, and everything I found was very negative, and I wanted to create a more balanced understanding of what it can mean to be donor conceived. So yeah, that was when I started to share my experience and started to think also more about what it had meant to me and my family, and how they had done things throughout the years, I guess.
And you said that when you first started, you asked your parents if they wouldn't mind.
Mhm.
What was their, I know they were supportive. What was their response? Were they surprised that you wanted to do this, or were they curious about it? What were their responses?
Yeah, no, I don't think that they were very surprised. My mom has always said that because throughout the years, people didn't know much about what it meant to be donor conceived. Like it wasn't that usual when I was a child. So I've always kind of felt like I needed to educate people. Even as a small child, I would explain donor conception, what it meant, because I was really proud about it. I didn't mind talking about it at all. So I think they felt like I was trying to educate people, talking about this amazing way my parents created a family ever since I was a small child. So I think they thought it was a natural next step from that. But yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I talk a little bit about this in a workshop that I do for donor conceived children about really finding your voice and being your own person. And it sounds like you've always been the sort of person who doesn't mind educating people and sharing things, right? Because some people are not like that. Some people are more private people and so as you were growing up and you had that experience where you can share with people and you were feeling proud about it and you wanted to tell people, did you ever feel like, oh my gosh, I'm just so sick of talking about this. People ask me the same questions over and over again, or the kids at school are asking me, what does this mean? Does it ever get to a point where it's hard for you, or how's your experience been?
I never thought that as a child, I think. And I think as long as people are open-minded and curious, I always want to explain and try to make people understand my perspective. I think when it became difficult was when I experienced a lot of resistance in people who had sort of a fixed understanding of what it meant or how a family looks, and where I don't sort of fit in. I also shared this experience a lot of time when I was in first grade or something like that. We had to do family trees at school. And my mom is a clinical geneticist, so she does like family trees in like a medical sense. So I've seen those at home a lot of times. So I knew basics about that. And so I was really, really confused about the assignment at school. So I went to my teacher and told her that I found the assignment very difficult because I was donor conceived. So I didn't really know who to put where and how to connect like the dots. And her response, like this was Emma, 6 years old, feeling like her story was the most incredible thing in the world. And her response was that she got really, really angry and called my parents saying that I was making up stories in school to be more special and telling lies. And so this was the first time of my entire life where I was met with someone who didn't just think it was a great story, an amazing opportunity for me and my family. I just think that made a very big impression on me. These times where this has happened to me has been the only times where I feel like it can be a bit exhausting to share my experience.
Yeah. Well, I don't blame you for that. Oh my gosh. When people are kind and interested, you never get sick of telling your story. You're always happy to share information and help educate people and let them know.
Yes.
That's great. So maybe you were made to do this, Emma. Maybe you were made to teach us all what it means to be donor conceived and for people to have hope. And I think it's really wonderful. So thank you so much for being out there. And, in any way we can support you, we're happy to be here for you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And before we wind down, do you think there's anything else the audience should share or that you'd like to let everyone know?
I don't think I really have anything as for now. And if people have any questions or anything they want to ask me in private, they can always message me, send me a DM or anything just go and see the content I've made about being donor conceived on Instagram. People are always more than welcome to send me a message and I'll definitely respond. Maybe not right away, but at some point.
And can you tell everyone what your how to reach you on Instagram or any other platform?
So I both have my Instagram, which is Donor Child, and then I also have a website that is Donor Child by Emma Groenbaek. But I think if you search for Donor Child on Google, you'll most likely find me somewhere.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much for coming. I really, really appreciate all your wisdom and your heartfelt thoughts. And please, share with your parents. We're very grateful that they support you in this, because I'm sure this will be wonderful information for a lot of people out there. So thank you so much for coming. And all of you out there, please reach out to Emma. She's a wealth of information. Reach out to us anytime, and please subscribe, because that's how we keep going. And if you join our mailing list, the information is in the notes, and you can get alerts and extra information and find out about all the upcoming podcasts. So thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.
The thing that most people, probably at least in our community, automatically assume is that they can't afford it and that it's out of their price range. While it's not cheap, it's definitely in the end, costly. But if it's something you really want, which it was for us,